Good morning. Okay, one more time. Good morning. Good morning. Couple of lessons that I learned. One a little while ago, the other one yesterday. One I learned a while ago is the longer somebody has to introduce you, the more you know that you really aren't that important. Thank you for that kind of introduction, Joel. But the reality is, if there's one thing I want you to take away from what I'm going to say today, is that there is nothing that I am doing in my role that is more important than what you will do through your work through Learning Leaders. There is nothing more important that we at the whole U.S. Department of Education will do that is more important than the work that you will do through Learning Leaders. It is each child and the adult's commitment to each child's success that ultimately will determine whether or not we actually achieve our goals for them, for our schools, and for our country, period. Now, the second lesson I learned was actually kind of embarrassing, I have to say. Yesterday, we had this big announcement. Some of you may have heard of this program called Promise Neighborhoods, which is replicating work like the Harlem Children's Zone. We had all these secretaries around for the press conference and things like that. We did it outside. It was really, really nice. And I had my new glasses on. And did the whole thing, and then somebody at the end came up and said, you know, your mom should have told you shouldn't wear your sunglasses at big events. I have new glasses that tint with the sun. And so I did this whole thing not realizing that I looked like I was the Secret Service where nobody could see my eyes. So I'm going to try and do this without my glasses. There is not a lot that I can bring to you today that you don't already know. I got in trouble last week for, I have to say, I've been working kind of hard lately. I was asked to be on one of these panels. And there's some big shots, as they say. And it was going back and forth for about 20 minutes, literally, where they were just bickering. I don't have a better way to describe it. Going at each other, talking about things that I keep saying, these conversations are not going to make us better. Our tests bad or good. Our charter's bad or good. Our union's bad or good. There are a lot of things worth talking about that are going to make a difference. Not one of those things at the abstract level is going to make a difference for our children. What is going to make a difference for our children is that we remember what I just hinted at a while ago. We can talk about all the systemic stuff. We can talk about all of the policies. We can talk about all of those things. But ultimately, it comes down to each child. If we are successful at actually ensuring the success of each child, then by definition, the whole system works. So then the question is, so how do you actually get there? How do you actually create that kind of a system? And that's a huge question, because we see that we've been working on this for a long, long time. We tried this kind of reform. We've tried that kind of reform. And I said this the other day, you know, our best teachers every day do something that's actually really incredible. Think about it. A teacher walks into a room from 25 to now 35, in some places, unfortunately, it's going to go to 40 students, all with great potential and ability, but performing at very different levels when they come in the door. Some speaking different languages, some with lots of different issues that they bring to the table, lots of different interests, lots of different needs. And somehow what our best teachers do is they figure out how to match exactly what each kid needs to get them exactly where they need to be and where we want them to be. That is incredible. The reality is, especially in our communities where our children need support the most, many of our teachers fail in that task. Some of that may be about them, but a lot of it is about how hard it actually is. So the question becomes, how do you provide the opportunity not only for every child to be successful, but for every teacher to be successful in reaching that child. That's where you come in. And that's why I said there is nothing more important than I will do in Washington, D.C. than the work you do through Learning Leaders. If our goal is actually to make sure that each child is successful, then we have to make sure that we partner with our educators around the academic goals and the developmental goals that we have for each child. That we make it a lot easier than it is today to be successful, so more of our teachers can be considered the best because of the outcomes that they have with our kids. We need to find ways to bring others with us. We know that in everything you're involved in, it's always a few who get deeply involved to make the biggest change. But success ultimately depends on that group being able to draw others in with them. And that's why a group like this, that's comprised of parents and people in the communities committed to the work, not only for their child's sake, but so that entire class, so that entire school can work for all the kids in it, means so much. Because the reality is, people don't care what I have to say. When I walk into a school, there's very little that matters to an individual parent when they're there seeing about their child that they want to hear from me about what I'm doing with the policies in D.C. What they want to hear from is another parent, somebody who spent time in the school, a teacher, a leader who understands how to connect with the parents, with the students, to help them figure out what needs to happen next to help their child be successful. They don't want to hear about the big mission. They don't want to hear about the fights between management and labor. They want to hear, how are you going to help this child, my child, do better so that they can have the life that they dream about? Definitely for their child, sometimes for themselves. So we're going to try and help from D.C. We proposed in our big reauthorization, the law that is known as Low Child Left Behind is really this thing called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It was established in 1965. It is the big piece of federal funding. It determines Title I dollars and a bunch of other programs. Historically, 1% of that has been reserved for parent engagement. We propose that it goes to 2%. That's nice. The child, I'll take that. Now here's where we're going to lay out the challenge. By the way, I should have said at the beginning, I still don't know who still lets me get on these invite schedules for speeches in the morning, because I'm not known as the cheerful guy. There's a lot of things I am, I'm not that guy. But the 2% thing, it can be a great thing. Here's the pushback. The pushback is if you actually look across the country at how that 1% gets spent, it's not clear. And it's definitely not clear that that 1% is actually having an impact today. And so people are asking the question rightfully, well, then why go to 2% if you can't account for the 1%? And that's why programs like this become so important. Because the reality is, as I was reminded upstairs just before we came in here, there is one thing that the data does show about parent engagement. And then that is that parents engaging specifically around the academic goals of the students, of their child, making sure they understand what it is that their child is supposed to be doing, helping ensure that their child shows up ready to do it, helping to make sure that in the classroom the resources are there for what's supposed to happen there to happen. Those activities are the activities that lead to better outcomes for our kids. And the more we can show how programs like this work, the more we can show that you can get thousands of parents engaged in this work and volunteers throughout the community who will show up, that's when we'll be able to make the case that that 2% is very well spent. Now I want to tell you about one other thing that's fairly broad that we're working on. I talked about this Promised Neighborhoods announcement. I mean, the whole notion there is very simple, something that all of us know, is that the reality is that You know, Jeff Kennedy made it popular, but many of us talked about it for a long time. If you start focusing on a high-quality school and then wrap it with supports from the family and supports from the community, the opportunity for the kids and that school to be successful go up dramatically. It's not rocket science. And that's something that Secretary Duncan believes deeply. It's something that I believe deeply. Frankly, it's something that the President believes deeply. So this Promised Neighborhoods program is going to be modest at first. It's 20 communities throughout the country, 2 right here in New York, 1 through Abyssinia and 1 through the Lutheran Hospital. To say, how do we do this? How do we organize communities this way? How do we draw these resources in and create this continuum from birth through college and career to make sure each of our children makes it all the way through? But this modest little program actually should provide a frame through which we can view all of the work that we do. Why wouldn't it be the case that every school in this country, forget about high-need schools, why wouldn't every school in this country be a community school? Why wouldn't you figure out how you get parents and community deeply engaged to support the students, to support the teachers, to support what happens after school and the weekends, to fill in those gaps during the summer, to make sure that there's things going on in the libraries for the for the very youngest kids? Why wouldn't you do that? It just makes sense. So all of our programs are going to move in that direction. But what we need is the models. We need people to show the way. We need your work to make it clear to people all around the country that the way you change lives, the way you change schools, the way you change systems is to care about each child and to get invested and get to work. Now let me close by saying I used to speak a lot trying to get people motivated to actually get involved in education reform work. And it's hard because we failed so many different times. And one of the things that I used to say is that the reality is when it comes to this work, it really only comes down to 2 things. The first is, what do you believe? What do you believe about our kids? And what do you believe that we can actually do for them? And second, what are you willing to do? How hard are you willing to go? What decisions are you willing to make? What are you willing to sacrifice? Turns out there's 2 other really important questions, though. Not quite as exciting, but still true. The third question is, what do you know? Motivated people without knowledge and direction aren't usually very helpful. I hate to say it, but it's true. And so the power of what you have is not only that you're active, but you have each other and this organization to lean on to figure out how to actually engage in a way that can make a difference overall. And you can pass that knowledge to others. And then the last question is, can you execute? Can you actually get it done? There are lots of good thinkers, there are lots of good talkers, but in the end, come game time, is how you play the game. I know I'm looking at a bunch of people who know how to play the game. Got the great strategy, got the commitment, that's why you're here today. Growing knowledge every day. So now it's just time to get it done. I thank you for the honor of being before you. Get it done.